Hello and welcome to another episode of Jaxon Talks. Everybody, with me, your host, Jaxon Stone, and I am joined today by someone that I met on social media, so that's amazing. I think we're going to actually talk a bit about how social media can be used for that and why it should be used for that. But I'm joined by a personal performance coach. He founded or is kind of building the Forever Athlete, which is kind of centered around mindset and movement and also largely around community. He hosts his own podcast called the Athletic Mindset Podcast. But today I'm joined by Cory Camp. What's up, man?
Dude, Jackson, thank you for having me. I'm stoked to be here. And yes, the power of social media. It's a beautiful tool if we allow it to be that. So I'm excited. That's how we got connected, and here we are.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a specific question about that in a second. But I start this podcast in a very specific manner. This is the only question that I really have planned out. Everything else is kind of like in my head and kind of just flowing off what you say, but this is the one that I plan out. But I think this is like a really important question, a question that we generally use to say hello. You may have been asked this question already today, and you kind of just maybe said an answer that wasn't really true or not as deep as you wanted it to be. But I think if we can answer this question, especially between two guys, more openly and honestly, then we can kind of create a deeper channels of dialogue. So I'm asking this question. Hopefully you answer it honestly. How are you doing, Cory? Like for real, for real.
I was gonna say, I could give you the blanket. Like, I'm doing great. Like, everything's awesome. Wholeheartedly, I am like freaking out. I'm like swimming in all these different directions. As you know, you're trying to, as you introed, running a company, building Forever Athlete as an overall brand that means so much more than apparel, which we just dropped, but also figuring out where to go with everything. It's like everything around me is very poetically falling apart. And it's like, how can we make sure everything is gluing and sticking together as efficiently as possible? So honestly, I'm doing okay. I could be doing better. I think I could always be doing better. And we're just thriving amongst the chaos. And I think that is, a testament to a lot of our background as athletes. We almost thrive. We like prefer these kind of situations, right? Like if things are going super, super perfect, we're like, what's going on? So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm just navigating the chaos one day at a time, one phone call at a time. So I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, I'm with you there for sure. Couple questions off that. I feel like I'm always towing the line between like feeling really purposeful and driven about what I'm doing while also feeling very overwhelmed at the exact same time. I don't know if I like to use the word balance because I don't know if it fits, but like, do you feel like you're the same way?
100%. It's constantly towing this tightrope of, all right, I know I need to apply pressure, and we can talk from like a physical or psychological standpoint of when we're talking about getting into the zone flow state. Like there's this sweet spot that exists between like the challenge that we're being faced with and our skills. And we need to toe this tightrope where, we feel like we can rise to the occasion. The challenge isn't too overwhelming, but it matches our current skill set. And then on the, whereas if we're over skilled for the challenge, we're going to be like, all right, whatever, like this is just too easy. We know that from sport, right? When we played that team that was not that great, we just kind of went in and we played flat and we were like, all right, we're kind of bored. It's no different in our life. We need to find a challenge that challenges our current skill set. And with us, it's finding that balance of how much is too much of a challenge. And we, I think, are always being growth minded, trying to take on more. And it's like, how much is too much?
Yeah.
And that's honestly a question I ask myself every single day.
Were you someone in school who thrived better when it got towards the deadline? Like, is that when you started to hit it hard, or were you like playing out, here's what I'm going to do
100%. I needed to apply pressure of a deadline to
Mm.
get things done. It's funny looking back on it. I don't know if this was the case for you, but my GPA was always higher during fall semester when swim was like full effect in
Mm.
college. And then when I had more free time on my hands and more freedom of like, oh, you can actually go and study, my GPA dropped like a significant amount in the spring. Um, and I always thought that was super interesting, but I think it went to show like I needed some structure and pressure externally to help me rise to that occasion rather than I think too much free time on my hands. I was just like, all right, cool. Like I can say yes to this going out. And I would always say no to that before when I was in season. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that a lot, but it's funny. I had a better GPA during our season too. Baseball season was in the spring or second semester,
Yeah.
but really the only reason I had a better GPA is because we traveled so much because went to South Dakota State. So like all of our baseball games were away. And
Yeah.
so the majority of the time we took tests on the bus and we just had notes to take the tests. So that's why I got better grades. But then my coach would throw me for a loop every once in a while. He'd be like, "Oh, this one is a no notes test," and I'd be like,
Like, what
"Hmm?
do you mean?
What
They're
do
all
you?
no notes. They're all notes tests. Come
So you
on.
just want me to sit next to you while I take this test?" Uh, sure. It's like, so that's why I got better grades. But
Isn't
I
that
mean,
isn't that a funny like dynamic? I mean, I remember going to nationals or something. We'd be down in Atlanta, and I would have to take a test in the hotel room, with my coach watching me, quote unquote. And it's like, look, neither of us really want to be there doing that right in that moment, right? We have more pressing things on our mind of
sure.
have to go perform uh, in a pool in a few hours. Like, what was the last part you heard there?
You and your coach are in your hotel room about to this test, and you have to be in the pool soon.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that every college athlete has some sort of memory of that, right? Where you're just like, all right, we're just checking the box here. Um, I'm not going to be focused on this test. We're just, all right, get it done. Time to pop in, and take care of business, which is kind of a shame because obviously, looking back on it, where should your priorities have been? But when you're in the moment, it's like that's the only thing that matters, right?
Yeah. I've become much more of a learner now.
Mm-hmm.
Like in school, my mindset was always like, I have to get good grades so I can play baseball. So I just get it done. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
no like trying to actually learn the information. It was like, do this so this can happen so you can do this. Once I started getting into like the junior senior year of college, like classes became a bit more interesting because it was more major focused, but it was still on the basis of just doing it to do it so I could do this other thing. Now I'm actually like learning because I want to, and podcasts and courses and all these things, and it's like I wonder what would have been different if that was my mindset in university. Were you the same way, or what kind of student were you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It made zero sense. I got worse grades in like general chemistry and biology than I did when I was learning the neuroscience behind motor control and all of this upper level, 500 level classes. So I was the same way. It needed to be way more challenging. Whereas those entry level courses, I was just like, all right, whatever. But even to your point too, it was like, all right, the only thing that really engaged me because my major was in exercise science and like biomechanics, kinesiology, I could like directly apply what I was learning in the classroom to what I was doing in the pool. I would like be like, oh, this is how my body works. Awesome. I can then go like toy around with it experimentally in practice and see, actually feel it firsthand, which is why I coach the way I coach a lot now is like when I teach something to someone that might seem a little bit abstract, to me, I was a kinesthetic learner. Like I needed to actually feel it out and understand it for it to click for me. And that's why I coach the way I coach is like, let's take this abstract thing and make it super tangible. We'll put our body through it and then it will click because we're working with the former athlete, right? It
Mm.
just, that's the language that you and I both speak, you know?
Yeah. Sorry, I tend to take big pauses after people
Okay.
talk because I like to digest what they say. I always think about it because I put this on YouTube as well, but I always think about what people think is happening while they're just listening to the audio version of it. Like, what's happening? Why is it so silent? But yeah, totally. So I want to take it back a little bit to like where you grew up.
Yeah.
Was swimming your first love? What were your parents like? All that kind of stuff. That's a big
Yeah.
question, right? You can answer a little bit about it, but I'll
Sure.
double click on whatever seems important. It's probably all important. This is probably not the right thing to say, but what's relevant right now?
What pops out the
Yeah.
most? Yeah, I mean, swimming, ironic, it runs in my family. My dad was a college swimmer as well. And he's been a summer league coach, which is huge in the Maryland, DC area. Summer league swimming is like the thing to do growing up in that area. Like everyone at least started in summer league, and then when you chose, like if you really liked it, like there was that option to take it year round. Then you're competing with your baseballs and your lacrosse and all of these other sports. But yeah, for me, it's really interesting because my mom, she was great. She didn't want me to turn out exactly like my dad of like, oh, you have this preset path of like swimming is your thing. So she was very hesitant to introduce me into the water. And it wasn't until I was 4 years old. We're at the pool that my dad's coaching at. We're members there. And it's the weekend before the pool opens, that weekend before Memorial Day. And this is back in the day of like paper sign up stuff. So my dad's over there. People are coming in to register for the team. He's taking notes. And he's like, Cory, just like go play on the playground, like go entertain yourself for an hour while I take care of this. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, I get distracted and there's a pool vacuum hanging out of the well, the deep end. And a pool vacuum is this very long pole. And on the bottom, there's these wheels and you're supposed to like literally vacuum up the bottom of the pool with it. Well, I thought that's a really cool thing to like play on and climb, obviously, naturally. So I start to climb the pole and the wheels move. Who would have thought? So they move. And next thing I know, I'm 4 years old, clinging onto this pole, and it's like slow motion, just sinking deeper and deeper into 14 feet of water. And I have no idea how to swim. I
Oh,
have not learned anything. So my dad hears me because I'm the only, it's a big splash and I'm the only person in the water. And he freaks out, swims the entire length of the pool, fully clothed, like shoes, everything, cell phone in his pocket. And he rescues me. Thankfully, before like I really got into deep trouble. And it's so funny because I don't remember any of this. All I remember is being in my dad's like extra sweatshirt and clothes that he had in the trunk of his car at McDonald's after the fact, being like, well, this is kind of cool. Like I have a meal. I'm warm now. Like this is great. My dad's like all pissed, shivering, just thankful that I'm okay. But that was a really pivotal moment for me because it actually obviously convinced my mom, like, all right, no more like sheltering Cory from the swimming lessons, at least. Like, we need to get him in there as a basic life skill. And fortunately, I did not have like an adverse relationship with water after that. Believe it
yeah.
or not, I was drawn to it and really started to excel in swim lessons a week later. And the rest is kind of history from there. It's swimming and honestly just water in general has always this almost like natural sanctuary for me that I can go to whenever life is really, really crazy. I can kind of retreat to it and for me. So that encouraged a lot of the themes throughout my life. And most recently, this move out to LA, it was like, I just want to be by the ocean. Like I don't know why, but I just felt like called to move out here and move to the beach. And it's when you're acting in alignment, like it's just things start to unfold, right? And I think that's kind of looking back at my story of what swimming has provided me, what it still provides me to this day. It's this sanctuary that I can kind of turn back to.
Yeah. Are you still swimming now? Is that a regular part of your exercise routine?
Not in a pool. So, I mean, I think to a certain point, like when swimming ended for me, it didn't end on the terms that I wanted it to. I had a lot to work through internally to get okay with even being back in a pool and understanding what swimming provided me. I was not in a great headspace for a little while there. Um, and I'm still working through that kind of relationship. So the thought of a swimming laps looking at a black line does not excite me at all anymore. It's great every once in a while, but I don't have any desire to really hop in a pool and really, really train like I used to. So no, not really, but I've found this new frontier of open water swimming, which has been something that I never really done before. And it's has this whole mix of it's a new frontier, it's exciting again. So I've been getting into that somewhat regularly, like once a week. I don't know about you, how you train personally, but for me, I like it's this constant struggle of like I want to be able to do a lot of really cool athletic things, but I don't want to like identify and just categorize myself as like one thing anymore.
Mm,
Like I run, but I wouldn't say I'm a runner. And that's coming from like doing 2 marathons in the past year. But I don't want to just fall into this box of like, oh, he's a runner. It's like, no, I'm like so much more than that. So I really struggle with labels, and I struggle to just say like, yeah, I swim. Yeah, I run. It's like those are just two activities that I enjoy doing, but it's bigger than that. And I think we should all adopt that kind of approach to our identity. You know what I mean?
absolutely. Do you think the way you feel about labels now is because you were only identified, or you only identified yourself as a swimmer for such a long time?
100%. And I mean, that's why I decided to found Forever Athlete. Was I had a gripe with the label of former athlete, because to me, former implies that what you did in the past doesn't really matter anymore. We should just box it up, put it in that shoebox, and put it in our parents' basement and forget about it. Let it collect dust. But there's so much value in that past experience, and I think whether you're an athlete or not, we have to realize there's value in our past experiences. It's up to us now. How are we going to let that value shine through into whatever it is we're doing? And keeping it open ended as much as possible allows it to become so much more. That's why I love how you set up this podcast, right? You have one question that you ask, and then it just flows from there. Whereas being a podcast host myself, like I remember early on, I was like, I'm going to do all this research and have like 20 perfectly curated questions. And when you go in it with this limited scope of like it has to hit these 20 questions, you miss out on so much more. And I think we do the same thing almost as a default, right? Like we want to just box ourselves into one thing. And in doing so, we're operating within our comfort zone a little bit more so. Whereas if we can shift that focus to, all right, I understand who I am. How am I going to express that today? Is that going to be through a podcast? Is that going to be through coaching? And that's kind of how I viewed what I get to do every single day. It's just an expression of who I am. And I have to make sure that it stays that way.
Absolutely. Was there, like, how long? I mean, you're obviously still in your journey, in your process of kind of discovering who you are exactly. That's an everyday thing, which is
Yeah.
part of the beauty of it. But like when you
Also frustrating.
stopped, yeah, when you stopped swimming to like kind of coming up with the idea of Forever Athlete, not where you are now, but like, was that a long process, or what was that? What was that like?
It was a long process, and it wasn't at the same point. So for context, like when I swam at Delaware, I started off as honestly as great as like my career could have started off. Despite having some health issues and all that, which we can dive into if you want, I became Delaware's first ever Rookie of the Year. Set school records as a freshman, set more school records as a sophomore. I scored the most points on the team all 4 years that I was there. And even still, like my senior year, my last ever race was my worst race of my college career. It was actually slower than I was my junior year of high school. So here I am at 22, ending my career slower than I was at 16. And I was just like, what the fuck? Like, how do I process this? And that was it. Like, there at the time, there was no real pro option for me. And I would have been like a fringe player for that. So it sent me into the spiral of like, all right, who am I without this? And because of it ended the way that it did, honestly, I felt a lot of resentment towards the sport. I didn't want to take responsibility for my performance. I tried to blame, burnout. I tried to blame, oh, well, the coaching wasn't great. The training was off this past year. Like, that's why. And it wasn't until I really started to look in the mirror about a year later. I didn't even recognize kind of who I was. I threw myself out of the pool, threw myself into the weight room, and was like, I'm going to turn myself so far the other direction, because I was a skinny distance swimmer. I wanted to put on muscle for the first time in my life. And I didn't want to be defined as this skinny distance swimmer anymore. I wanted to be jacked, I wanted to get ripped. And fat pounds, and it wasn't all muscle. I was like, holy crap, I went to go run and my knees hurt. After a mile, I was like, this is nothing like I felt. And I realized I was just trying to put a Band-Aid over who I was as an actual person. And I needed to get back to my core identity, my roots. And that started my own weight loss journey, which, has then led into my, and with each of those, it's really interesting to see, like, it isn't a destination, but with each stop along the way, you're like, oh my gosh, I found a new level of who I am, a new depth to who I am. You know that, like, no matter where you're at in that journey,
Part two, frozen. We'll come back here in a second and we'll be back.
there we go. You're muted on your end.
That was great.
There we go. Did it just stop, or what happened?
I think it just, that was super weird. It's never happened before. Yeah.
I love it.
Hopefully we still have the first part of that, but it is what it is.
So good. Where were we at? What did you hear last?
You were in your weight loss journey.
Awesome. So yeah, I think that was really a turning point for me, was when I decided I'm gonna lose some weight. I got up to 195, and I was consistently like 150, 155, maybe 160 when I was swimming. So I was almost 200 for the first time, which at 5'10" was not like me at all. And that opened up this kind of ever evolving door of like, all right, now I started to really feel like myself again physically. And because I felt like myself again physically, I started to get that confidence back of, okay, I can like go and do this, whether it's starting a podcast, whether it's starting a company. All these things that I've done since swimming ended really stemmed from me just physically, and then mentally, starting to feel like me again, and understanding that feeling like yourself and being you is this like ever growing journey, which is the beauty of it. Like, there's always another layer to being in alignment and being you. And I think there's a beauty in that if we choose to embrace it, rather than being this like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get there.
Yeah.
It's like enlightenment. Like, what are we really chasing with enlightenment? It's the journey that we should really be focused on, which sports really teaches you, but we kind of lose sight of it when it ends, because we don't have that same structure in place anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, when I stopped playing baseball, like it's like you lose a sense of community. I'm never
Mhm.
ever gonna make friends like that ever again in my life. Like I'm never gonna have something to compete for. Like who am I outside of? But I went through it sounds like the exact same journey as you. Like a lot of resentment when I stopped playing
Mhm.
ball, into leading me back into baseball. Now coaching youth. Starting having a podcast and having my own company, and like also going through the same sort of self-discovery process. And it really starts with deciding that you want to do it, like starting to get curious about who you are. I think that's the beginning step of like any
Mhm.
self-discovery journey. But what I mean, do you have any tips or advice for someone who is like kind of trying to figure it out? They're like maybe kind of stuck in a rut, and they hear all this rhetoric on social media about you just got to be you just got to be authentic, like discover yourself. Well, those things are really hard when you don't know where to start. And so do you have a starting point? Oh man, I think we froze again. Brutal.
I think there we go. The best starting point for that, because it can be so large and ambiguous, right? That we get overwhelmed and we're like, all right, cool. Like, I'm not going to start that thing. Screw that. Um, so a great starting point is, especially for the athletes out there, um, sitting with this question of why did you get started in the first place? Like, what was it that drew you to whatever sport that you played? That was really what I sat with when I finally started this journey of like, all right, I'm going to stop throwing myself a pity party. I'm going to stop like running away from the problems that I need to run away from. And I'm going to start facing them one at a time. And in doing so, I sat with that question and I realized I loved swimming, not for the hard workouts, not for, the time that it honestly took away from me, the early mornings, all of that stuff. I loved it because it put me with great people. And I was like, how can I get back to that? How can I start creating something where I'm just surrounding myself with great people? And that was like, oh, I'm gonna start coaching and paying it forward. You know what I mean? I became a summer swim coach. And that was a whole interesting process of, just teaching kids how to swim and getting them in this mindset of like, hey, just have fun with it. Be like, go out, explore, play with it, just have fun. So starting with that, and then it has evolved. But if you can identify what that core, like at its core, what drew you to that first thing, understand that first. And the other thing I would say with core values, because that's another like ambiguous thing, right? Like, what are your core values? Companies have core values. People, we as humans have core values. Start to like writing out like your core belief around money, your core belief around relation that come from. Does it come from your family? Does it come from your community, the people around you? And then asking yourself that last question of, is it true to you? Because oftentimes there's a lot of disconnect. Like I think from a financial standpoint, I have a very different financial relationship and belief around money than my parents do. And that's because I'm an entrepreneur and for profession were teachers and coaches. So they, had a pension, they had the security of this. So they believe money should be a certain way. And I had to sit with understanding like I believe money works differently. And then once I understood that, like having that conversation with them, like, hey, I know you want me to have this stable, secure job, but this is my belief and this is why I believe it. This is what I'm going to go do. And getting on the same page there. The more you can get into alignment with those around you, getting on the same page and just laying out any differences, the less resistance you're going to have in your life.
Yeah, we can't expect people to know what we're thinking unless we communicate it, right? We have this like preconceived notion that people should just know what we want or what we think or what we need and how we can get it. But we have to communicate it. And that's an important part of anything.
We're great at like subconsciously imposing our expectations onto other people, but not letting them know. And then when they fail to meet those, then we're upset with them.
Right.
When it's like, well, you didn't let them know like what you expected from the get-go. Like what, and that can go for romantic relationships, that can go for friendships, it can go family, that can go as an employer, like when you're working with employees, like being clear and upfront of like, hey, this is what I expect. Can you meet that? And having that conversation up front saves you a lot of trouble in the long run.
Absolutely. Was it during this process of post swimming into where you are now that you kind of figured out that there's this complete intersection of physical body and, you know, mental well-being, and how that all intersects and how it's all inseparable?
Yeah, it really came for me like as I started to find new movements that I enjoyed, whether it was a new frontier of like getting into running, to the sense of like, oh, I have something to train for and I can go and improve myself this. It was this sense of like, man, like how expansive does this feel? Like I'm 26 and I can go run a marathon for my birthday and PR. Like this is freaking awesome. Like who's to tell me that my best athletic days, physical feat days were behind me? Like there's now all these new frontiers. And once I started to step there, I realized like, oh, this can also apply to this area of my life and this area of my life. And that was something that I didn't know or didn't choose to focus on when I was in swimming. So it's like going about it a different approach. And I think for those that are still in, sport in the traditional sense of whether they're high school, collegiate, if they can start to take that approach of like, it's just an expression of who they are and viewing it as such, then resentment around it being over when it is over, because they just realized, okay, that chapter's over. Like, how do we move into this next chapter and and build upon the themes that we learned in that last one? Like it's a never ending book that we're writing.
Yeah. You still hear me?
Now I can. It's
Okay,
like
cool.
cutting in and out.
This is gonna be the best episode I've ever posted.
Let's go, baby.
I mean, the content is magical. Just gonna have to be chopped up pretty good, but that's all good. That doesn't bother me. But I had a thought. What was it? Yeah. Okay, we'll bring it back to it when I when I think of it. But no, it's not coming back. It means it wasn't meant to be. It'll come back if it's meant to be. But I want to circle back to when I at the beginning when I talked about social media.
Yeah.
You and I post a lot on social media. It's part of our businesses, part of our brands, part of how we make money. And so I assume that you have a healthy relationship with social media. For one, my question is, how did you cultivate that healthy relationship with social media? And how do you think others can start to cultivate a healthier relationship with their social media and their kind of patterns of usage?
Yeah, I think it really starts with setting an intention before you go into it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect at this. There's definitely times where, or Instagram, whatever it may be, but understanding that if you set an intention before you go into it, and it can be something different, and I have to, as creators, it's like, all right, am I going on there to create and to provide value, or am I going on there to be a consumer for a second? And being clear with that, because that intention.
this is the best.
person like, hey, look, my life's so great. Like I'm on a boat right now. Being selective with what I'm choosing to share in that sense. I want it to be value driven. And in doing so, I also want it to be social. Like I want my audience to be engaged. And that's what I always tell people. Like we have forgotten a lot of sense that social media is meant to be social. Like we are meant to interact with each other. And honestly, exactly what we did. I want to interact with someone through social media as the place that it starts, but I want to get off of social media as quickly as possible and hop on a Zoom call and get to know each other a little bit better and learn really about you as a human. And I think you can do so much of that more so in 30 minutes than, a text exchange in the DMs or just passively consuming content. And that definitely takes time, but it's worth it. I think one of the coolest things was when I took my road trip out here with my dad. We took 2 weeks and we drove from Northern Virginia all the way to LA. And we stopped in all these cities along the way. And in each city, I had someone that I had met via social media. I never met in person. And we would meet up with them for coffee or a bite to eat or a workout. And it was so cool to see my dad being like, how did you know this person? I was like, oh, it's Instagram. And he was like, I just don't understand. Like he's 64. He's like, I don't get this. And I'm like, yeah, I know you don't. It's cool. But you can, if you choose to use social media as a platform to enhance your life, it has that full capability too. But I think, again, that tightrope, that balance of like, how much of your time are you spending on social media? It should be used to cultivate real life relationships, not just social media friends. Like at this point, I can't wait to get to Dallas at some point and give you the biggest hug in the world because we've connected on multiple points all through social media, but it's because we both were open to it and set that intention rather than going into it and being like, oh, I'm going to compare myself to what it is you're doing compared how it stacks up to what I'm doing and have any feelings of like resentment towards it. Now we throw that out the window. We set the intention of let's connect to connect and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's spot on. Like the intention has to be there, right? And we talked about before we started recording, not the first or the second recording, whatever Zoom caught, but when we were just chatting about how you Instagram storied someone that you just had on your podcast. And I was like, oh, if Cory had him on his podcast, he's probably someone that I want to follow. So I clicked on him and the thing that pops up in his bio was like men's mindset coach, like trying to coach peak performance. And I was like, immediate follow, like feeling no sort of like competition or comparison with what he's doing, even though we're sort of in like the same space, just trying to follow someone who's going to put things on my feed that engage me, that bring me value and that I can learn from as well. Because shoot, I don't know anything. And so the more people I can follow that can teach me stuff, the better. And so I think that's the intention that I bring to social. And I think that's the intention that you're definitely talking about.
Recording number 3. We're rolling.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
This has happened to me a couple times.
Has it?
Hilarious.
Oh man. Yeah, I think it's pretty funny. We might have to do this again, but I'll let you know what I can scoop up from this episode. But what did you hear? I was talking. What did you hear me say? We're already frozen.
You were talking about following Q.
Oh yeah. So I'm saying like
you heard like you saw what he does and you were like, this is a no-brainer.
Right. Like even though me and him are possibly in the same space, trying to reach the same people, there's no, for me, at least in my mind frame, there's no competition there. There's like, oh, this guy probably holds some of the same values that I do. I definitely want to follow him. I definitely want to see him on my feed because he is going to teach me something. He's going to, whatever, because I don't know anything. None of us know anything. We're all just trying to figure it out. So maybe he's in tune with something that I'm trying to figure out. And then there's that passage of information. And it's like, that's the intention I bring to social media. Just like you said, like sometimes I get caught up and I'm just like, what's this? But really it's about that. It's about exactly what you said, the intention. Like, what am I getting on this for? Am I getting on just to scroll? Cool. Am I getting on to consume so that I can get a little bit of creative juices flowing so that I can create something important? Or am I going on to post and then just ghost it and then come back later to check some notifications and some DMs to see how my content did, right? What is your idea there? So yeah, you're right for sure.
Yeah, I think too, like that point of it's a no-brainer, like we're in the same space, like let's follow each other. It's so funny to see like when you come across people that don't share that value. You know what I mean? Like when I was in I was an assistant fitness director for over a year, and when I was in that role, I recognized like who I added value to the most client-wise. And I would never try to take someone else's client, but I understood that like there's so many clients to go around that if they're not meant for me, that's totally okay. And I need to release that need to work for everyone, to work for the people, to work with the people that I really want to. And I had no problem, if someone came to me and expressed interest in working with me, but after talking with them, it just didn't fit. Like I loved to put them in touch with another trainer. And it's so funny because a lot of those trainers were like, I just don't get it. Like, why do you always pass off? Like, I'm not complaining, but I'm also like, I don't do the same thing to you. And it's like, I don't expect that, but I'm secure in the sense of I understand who I am and what my value add is. And I'm not going to start chasing things that don't end up in alignment of that. And I think it shows itself on social media pretty well. Because of that, I don't fall into that comparison trap as often as some other people do.
Mhm.
It's still like everything, right? Like we all have jealous triggers that are going to pop up. The bonus of going through that enlightenment, personal growth, whatever journey you want to call it, is that just happens with less frequency, because in that whole process you're understanding deep rooted who you are. And the more that you understand that, the less you let things affect you that are external. You're able to release that need for control of everything, which is, I mean, tough. Again, circling back to the athlete in us. I mean, we love when the weather conditions are exactly perfect and we get the perfect amount of sleep and our diet's on point and all these things. How often does that happen? Like almost never. So like control what you can control, release the need to control things that are outside of it is huge.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. I have one last little thing that I want to ask you, and then we can kind of plug some of your stuff, and then I'll let you go. Hopefully, we don't have to do a fourth recording in the midst of the next 2 to 3 minutes, but you never know. Whatever comes up, it's totally cool. So, what advice, maybe general, maybe specific, would you give to either a graduating athlete or someone who just stopped playing their sport after a very long period of time? I jinxed it. Totally jinxed it. Yeah, dude, I jinxed it for sure.
I think you jinxed it.
Oh my God, so hard. I jinxed it so hard.
I think the question is, what advice would I give for a graduating athlete?
Yeah, or someone who just stopped playing their sport for after a long period of time.
Yeah. Release the need for a timeline.
Mm.
Because you're coming from a place, an environment where there was this clear ladder, right? Like you started off in Little League, you made it to your high school team, the travel team, whatever. Like you're climbing it up, you get the scholarship, now you're here. And there was these deadlines to it, right? Like you had to perform at a certain showcase by X date to get the scholarship to move here. And all of a sudden you're thrown into the real world and there's no deadlines. Like it's just all self-imposed arbitrary stuff. So release the need for you to have it figured out by 22, by 23, by married by 26, whatever it looks like release the need for it. Be open to what the possibilities can, because what's happening with that expectation of a certain timeline is you're self-imposing a glass ceiling to yourself, and you're shutting yourself off to what the universe can actually provide you. So release the need for that, be open to the possibilities, and don't be afraid to have fun. Like, play around with it. Life doesn't need to be super serious. We need some play in there. So make sure you're playing constructively and productively, but have fun with it. We put so much pressure on ourselves to have it figured out by a certain age. And that was suffocating me for the longest time, of like, I needed to make 6 figures by 23. And then I realized that doesn't make me happy. So there's some other things that I need to focus on first.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful words and beautiful advice from the forever athlete. You know what I mean? Fantastic. Where can people find you? I know where to find you, but where can the listeners find you?
Yeah, pretty simple. Website is corycamp.com. Instagram is Cory Camp. And if anything that I said today resonates with anyone listening, feel free to reach out. Send me a DM, send me an email. Would be more than happy to connect a little bit further and see where you're at with your journey.
Yeah, he has even more in-depth conversations on his podcast, so check that out. The Athletic Mindset podcast, real cool. I'll be on there soon.
The problem with all these projects, man, it's like I forget which one's
the plug. Yeah.
But yes, that episode is a powerful one. I can't wait for that to drop. So I love it, and I appreciate the time. It's always good to connect with you. So thank you for the space.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I'll do my best to chop this episode up into some actual listening pieces. But we may have a part 2, which will actually be part 1, because we'll just have to redo the whole thing.
I'll come out to Dallas.
Yes.
Come out to LA. We'll make it happen.
The in-person conversation will be much more better. I might still have a buffer there, but we'll see. Because we're hitting a freeze again with the tail end of this episode. Oh, amazing. Yeah, this is so good. It's the best. It's gotta go with the flow.
There we go.
Yeah.
He's back.
We gotta shut it down before I break the whole internet. So, oh no, I can't.
There we go.
Well, okay. Thank you for coming on. We'll see how. Yeah, this is amazing. I love talking to you. Breath of fresh air as always. But yeah, cheers.
Likewise to you, man. I appreciate it. If the recording's no good, no worries. Just let me know.
We'll run it back.
We'll jam out another time.
Yeah.
And yeah, if there's anything I can do to help support, let me know.
Absolutely.
I think what you're doing is crazy stuff. Good stuff. I'll put you in touch with Lori here in a minute too.
Perfect. Hell yeah. Thank you. All right. Cheers. Thanks for everyone for watching. Share this with a friend. All right. Bye.